Hey guys, it's Charlene. I'm here with another video with 6 ways to use the brand new Paper Pouncers. So I'm going to start out here with the Plant Happy Thoughts stamp from Picket Fence Studios, and I'm going to show you how to do blended stamping with these. So I've got my green paper pouncer and I'm using some Perfection here from Simon Says Stamp. And you can see I just tap it in the ink and then I tap it on top of the stamp. And because it is a sponge and it fades out from the edge, you're not going to get any harsh lines like you would if you stamped directly with the ink pad onto your stamp and tried to do this. This is going to be perfectly blended. So I'm using the teal paper pouncer here and I have some Ocean Simon Says Stamp Positively Saturated ink, and I'm just blending that right over the green, the Perfection that we used. And then lastly, I'm going to come in with Royal, and I'm going to use my dark blue paper pouncer for this. So you can see how it fades out there, kind of where the teal fades out. It's really easy to do, and you don't have to try and use a blending brush to blend out the lines from the ink pad. It's just super easy. And if you need to add more ink, like I'm going to do here, I decide that I want that teal and the blue to be darker. So you just go back in and I'm adding more ink. I'm going to do the blue a couple of times just because I wanted it to be really dark. And then I do come back in one more time with the Ocean as well. And so it gives this beautiful fade. You can use this with any kind of stamp. You could do it on rubber stamps. You could do it on a photopolymer clear stamp like I'm doing here. You could do it on a very detailed stamp. You could do it on a silhouette style stamp like I'm doing. The beauty of the paper pouncers is that because they fade out and don't have a harsh line on the edge, you can do that beautiful kind of blended stamping. The second way to use paper pouncers is with die cuts, and I'm going to show you a couple of different ways that you can use the paper pouncers on the die cuts in this video. So when I first started doing this, I thought, I'm going to do a faded out bottom on this word die, and it says happy birthday, and so I just took the paper pouncer, dabbed it in my ink, and then kind of pounced it along the edge. Ultimately, I decided I wanted it to be a solid color, so I did go back in and actually cover the whole word die, but it would look beautiful with that faded out inking. I just didn't think it worked very well for this card that I was making. I cut down my panel using a stitched rectangle die, and then I added some foam tape on the back here. You can see I just bent back part of the foam tape so that way I can go ahead and line it up in the center of the card and then flip it over and pull off the remainder of that release tape so that way I can make sure it's nice and centered, no problems. And then I'm going to glue my word die on there. I did add 2 white die cuts behind the happy birthday as well to give it a little bit of dimension, and I glued those together off camera. But all I added from there was a few sequins here and there. These are the peacock tail sequins from Picket Fence Studio. They're so pretty, green and blue and purple. But there's the finished first card. So now I'm going to show you a few other ways to use the paper pouncers. I have these gorgeous Fanciful feather dies, and there's 3 of them. I'm going to cut them out of plain white cardstock. And then I'm going to add a little bit of dot runner on the back, just the tiniest little bit, because I just want them to be held in place on this whole piece of white cardstock, because I'm going to pounce over them, and I want the outline of the feathers to be on the piece of cardstock that's underneath, but I still want to be able to remove the feathers once I'm done. So this is a 2-for-1 technique with these pouncers. I love it so much. So I've got my 3 feathers down there. For the first feather, I'm coming in here with some bubble gum, and you can see in this video I'm tapping off a bit more than I was in that initial video I did talking about the paper pouncers. And I found that doing this helps me see kind of how much ink is on the pouncer, as well as how dark or concentrated the color is. And that's really the only reason I'm doing that tap off. It also will certainly ensure that there aren't any kind of harsh spots, but even if you don't tap off, you're really not going to get any harsh spots. It's more for me to kind of see how much color I have on the pouncer, because in particular, some of the darker colors, they will apply really boldly to your die cuts versus your really light colors don't. So for this second feather, I'm coming in here and I'm using Cheeky, and you can see I just am using that same pink paper pouncer. I say that 10 times fast. Pink paper pouncer. And I did tap it off onto a paper towel just to get any little bit of excess ink off of there. But I'm tapping around here and I'm kind of bringing the ink over onto that bubble gum because I want it to blend in together. This is going to be 3 shades of pinkish red that I'm using here. I've got the bubble gum. This was the Cheeky. And then next I'm going to be using Pucker. I did decide to come back with a little bit more bubble gum because I wanted it to be a little bit darker, because that's, you can see what I'm saying now. Some of the inks just apply a little bit darker than other inks. And I think that's true with any kind of tool, probably with ink blending brushes or with the paper pouncers. So now I can come in and I can use my red paper pouncer for the pucker, because I think pucker, even though it's got some pink tones to it, is really more of a red than a pink. So coming in, I'm going to tap off there real quick, and I'm just going to go right over the die cut. Now, certainly you could color your die cuts without putting them on top of a piece of cardstock like this. I just thought this was really fun, getting this 2-for-1 kind of shadow effect. So you could use the die cuts and then the cardstock that you pounced on top of for 2 separate cards. I'm going to actually use them for the same card, and you're going to see it's going to look really neat. I'm going to just offset those feathers and it creates a really, really beautiful look. I did want to point out that I do have this video sped up. If you want to see how these work in real time, check out my initial video that I did. I'll link to that up here in the right hand corner. I have this sped up just because I'm going through so many techniques that I want to be able to show them all to you. So certain parts are sped up a little bit just for time's sake. So there is that cool shadow effect I was talking about. You can see those beautiful feathers. And then you just come in with your adhesive eraser and you can get any of that little bit of dot runner off of there that you need to remove. And once I have that done, I'm going to do another fun technique with the paper pouncer. So I'm doing a couple on this card. The next technique you can do is heat embossing. So I brought in my black paper pouncer. I've decided to use this solely for embossing ink, and I am just pouncing on the embossing ink onto my die cut. So you could do this on a die cut, or you could do it with a stencil, which is awesome, because if you've ever tried to do any kind of heat embossing with a stencil, you know it can be tricky to get into all of the little nooks and crannies of the stencil with the embossing ink, and this works really well. So I'm using it here on the feather dies just along the bottom because I'm going to heat emboss the bottoms in silver. Now I do hope Picket Fence Studios comes out with maybe a clear one or something along those lines that people could get just to use to have for embossing. But for now, I figured I wasn't going to do too much with black, I thought, so I decided to sacrifice my black paper pouncer and turn it into a heat embossing one. Now I've got my silver embossing powder there, and I'm just pouring it over where I applied the embossing ink. And what's fun about this is I'm not going to get a harsh line. So if I had taped off over the feathers so that I could use my embossing ink pad and just tamp down with the ink pad, I would have a really harsh line on there, which is fine if that's what you're going for. But this gives a really organic, natural feeling to it because that embossing ink is fading out just like regular ink would do. So now I'm heating up that embossing powder with my heat gun here, and you can see now I have this fun silver bottom to all of my feathers. I think this just looks so pretty. I was really, really pleased with how this turned out. For my sentiment, I'm going to be using a sentiment from a different stamp set. It's the Baby Butterfly Beauties, but I really like this sentiment, and so I'm stamping it out here with some black pigment ink, and I'm just doing it towards what's going to be the bottom right hand corner of my card, and that'll make more sense here in just a moment. Once I get that stamped out, I'm going to go ahead and bring back in all my pieces. And I took that piece that had the shadows on it from the pouncing that we did earlier, and I cut it down to about 2 inches. So it's 2 inches by 5.5, and I'm going to bring it right across the center of the card here. So this is nice because you can still see that beautiful sentiment down there. It looks like it all goes well together. And now I can bring those gorgeous feathers that I did, and I'm going to go ahead and put them right over those shadows. So I'm using some dot runner here, and I'm actually using just a little scrap of cardstock there, so that way I don't get the dot runner all over my desk. But I only ran the dot runner in the center of the feather because I want the feather to kind of be popping up a little bit on the bottom and on the top to give it just a little bit more dimension. So again, moving over so I don't get that dot runner on top of the feather, I just moved it over a little bit to the side, ran the dot runner in the middle along the back, and again offsetting it against that shadow. Doesn't that look so cool, you guys? I could see this with all kinds of different die cuts looking amazing because it just, I don't know, it helps it to kind of pop off the card. I feel like this is a very whimsical kind of fairy tale looking card to me. I could see this being for a baby shower or a wedding or any of those kinds of things, a birthday. Just perfect for most occasions. But there's that finished card. The fifth way you can use paper pouncers is with stencils, and that's probably going to be the first place your mind goes, and it makes sense because these work so well with stencils. I'm starting out here with some Villainous Potion, and I'm using Distress Oxides for this card and for the next card. Up till now, everything I've used has been dye ink, so I did actually get a second set of paper pouncers because I want to use one for my oxides and one for my dye inks. In order to tell the difference, I just added a little white circle on the top of the case of the ones that I'm using for my Distress Oxides. So that's how I have them marked, but I'm sure there's lots of different ways that you could do it. So now I'm coming in here with some Lumberjack Plaid, and I don't know if you guys have noticed, but Lumberjack Plaid kind of has some pink undertones, and it goes together really well with purple and red. So if you haven't tried that combination, you might want to give it a try. And all I'm doing again is pouncing into the ink and then pouncing over the stencil. I will say that Distress Oxides, they don't apply as dark as the dye inks do. So they go on much softer, and you have to do a few more layers with the pouncers than you do with the dye inks. So just keep that in mind. For instance, if you are trying to decide, okay, do I want to use my pouncers for dye inks or for oxides? And so now you can see I'm coming in here with Crackling Campfire, which is kind of a nice orangey red, and they all combine really well together. The last color I'm going to bring in is Mustard Seed. Now, I'm sure some of you are wondering, do you really need 2 separate sets of pouncers, one for dye ink and one for oxides or hybrids? Well, I am honestly just going off of what the company recommends. The risk of contaminating your ink pads with the pouncers if you're using oxide with a dye ink pad is always a concern. I can't say for sure whether or not it would damage your ink pads. I'd rather be safe than sorry personally, and I went ahead and got a second set that I could use with the oxides or with any hybrids. So next I'm coming in here with the Flit Butterfly Die, and I'm going to cut out from the stenciled panel, but then I'm going to cut out what's left over using a stitched rectangle die. And you're going to see it kind of cuts it into two pieces, but that's okay. I'll show you how to apply it to your card. It's easy peasy. I wanted the butterfly to look like it was kind of flying out of that stenciled image. So I'm going to stamp my sentiment here, and you know what? Actually, that first sentiment I used was from the Friendship sentiment set. This one's from the Baby Butterfly Beauties. I like them both. So I stamped that out, and then I did die cut off camera several of the butterflies. I think I cut out 4 in white cardstock, and I layered them all up underneath the stenciled version of the butterfly. So now I can go ahead and put the whole card together. I have this beautiful aqua sky piece of cardstock that I'm using for the top of my card base. And I've just got some liquid adhesive on there, lining it up and making sure it covers all the way around. You can see I've got my butterfly there under an acrylic block just so I can make sure all those layers of cardstock are very well adhered before I put them onto my card. And now I can go ahead and place everything, and this is how that 2-piece kind of background that was cut out, this is how I'm going to adhere it. It makes it really easy. So I'm getting everything lined up exactly how I like it, making sure everything's nice and straight on the card. And then I'm taping with some highlighter tape, but you can use any kind of low-tack tape to do this. I just prefer to use highlighter tape. And so I've taped the top, and then I'm also going to tape the bottom piece. And the reason I'm doing that is because I want to be able to remove the butterfly, and then I can use that tape as a hinge. Now when I add my liquid adhesive all the way around there and flip it back over, it's going to be in the exact same spot that it was when I placed it with the tape. So it works out really well. It's super easy to do. This is also a great way to, if you have trouble with positioning card panels so that you have even spacing all the way around your card, you can do this as well. Just get it positioned, put that little piece of tape on there, flip up the whole panel, and then glue it, and then you can flip it right back down, and it's going to be in that same spot. So now I can take my butterfly and I'm just going to pop it right in there. It's going to fit in just like a puzzle piece. And then all that's left to do is add a little bit of bling onto the card. So here's everything finished. Isn't that so pretty? I love the little gemstones. They add that nice little bit of shine. The 6th way you can use your paper pouncers is over mixed media. So I took that same stencil and I used some paper glaze velvet in duckling fuzz, and I put it on there with the stencil. I let it dry completely, and now I'm coming in and I am pouncing directly over the dried mixed media. So I'm starting out here with some Lumberjack Plaid, and this is going to create a beautiful, beautiful sunset. I did go ahead and skip forward. The other colors that I used were Crackling, Campfire, and Mustard Seed. But you can see how beautiful all of these colors have blended out. I really like how this looks. And then I'm going to off camera just lightly wipe it off with a paper towel in order to get some of that excess ink off of the paper glaze velvet. Now I can go ahead and put my card together. I have a piece of black cardstock that I'm going to be using as my border layer. And this is cut down so that there's about 1/8 or 1/4 of the inch, I believe, all the way around. And then I have cut down the sunset piece so that there's about 1/16 of an inch from the edge to the black border. So once I get that down, you can see I have already die cut out my sentiment, which says hello there. And I did cut 2 of those and layer them up using some liquid adhesive. And then I can just go ahead and glue them on top of the card. A very quick and simple card, but I think it really looks beautiful with all of that gorgeous blending and all of that texture. All right, guys, that is going to wrap up this video. I hope you enjoyed learning about all the different ways you can use the new Paper Pouncers. Please be sure to like and subscribe, as well as hit that notification bell so that I can continue bringing you more crafty content in the future. Until next time, happy crafting.